Hey dudes, welcome to Splat from the Past, the only 80s themed horror and sci-fi show where things can get totally radical. Now today, I will be welcoming one of the great low-budget horror auteurs, unsung heroes of all time, Brian Yuzna. You all know who Brian Yuzna is. He's the man behind such horror classics such as Re-Animator, Bride of Re-Animator, From Beyond, The Dolls, Society, The Dentist, and on and so forth. I mean, he is a legend. You know, started out working with Charlie Band at Empire, and he made all those classics. I'm going to have him on the show today to talk about how he met Charlie and how he got to be his producer and then ultimately started directing low-budget horror films. Like I said, the man is an unsung hero and a legend. So, here is my interview with Brian Yuzna. So, going back in time, did you like movies early on?
Yes, I think like everybody, I did. A difference with me is that I grew up in Latin America. So I grew up mainly, when I first started going to movies, it was in Panama in the 50s. And Panama didn't have television back then. So I probably had an experience with movies that was a bit different from most Americans, say. Even it being the 50s, which is probably way long ago compared to the age of your audience. You didn't see a movie unless you went to a movie theater, and we only went on Sundays to the matinee for the kids. I mean, we went to other ones too. So when I was really young, my main movie going was to go to the matinee on Sunday, and this is in Panama. So everybody, I lived in the city, so everybody speaks Spanish. Third world country, but the movies were in English with Spanish subtitles, and so these shows would be about 3 hours or more or so, and they would show a feature, maybe a Three Stooges short, maybe an RKO serial. I'm sure I saw all the Rocket Mans, Captain Marvel, Batman, and maybe a trailer, maybe some other short subject, sometimes a double feature. So you didn't know what you were going to see when you went.
Yeah. Do you remember the first movie you ever saw?
I don't think I remember the first one, although I do have a memory, which I think is a real memory, but I've learned to not trust my memory, because my mother had told me this story that I was just a toddler, I guess, and we were at a movie about, I don't know if it was a cowboy or it was just about a horse. It was a white horse or something, and I guess there were cowboys and Indians or something. But I guess an Indian, I remember seeing the horse, just an image of that. And I guess the Indian stabbed someone in the chest with a knife, and I just started screaming and wouldn't stop and had to be taken out.
Western.
But that's maybe the first movie I saw. I'm not sure. The first horror movie I saw was the Creature with the Atom Brain.
Oh yeah.
So I don't really remember that many of the movies we saw at that matinee. I remember the Three Stooges and the cereal and stuff very well, but I didn't remember really the movies. The one, when I think back, the one that I remember is the Creature with the Atom Brain, because it just really scared me and gave me nightmares and made me nauseous, and so that was my that was the movie that infected me with the horror virus.
Oh, wow. Yeah, Westerns were so popular back then. I mean, it could have been a Hopalong Cassidy or Audie Murphy or even John Wayne, Could have been anything.
What are you talking about, the Indian one?
Yeah.
No. I doubt if it. I know Audie Murphy. Those were pretty soft, Hopalong Cassidy. I think this was a little, maybe John Wayne or something, for sure.
Yeah, or Randolph Scott. What are your favorite movies of all time?
Well, that's pretty hard to say, isn't it? You start on, that's a long and windy road. You start with something and it starts opening it up.
Yeah.
It's more, I don't know how you talk about favorites so much. I know the movies that kind of really kind of affected me, that
mm-hmm.
were influenced me when I was growing up. And then I, of course, especially since I've been making movies and since the VHS era and everything, then I started actually watching a whole lot of movies that I, a lot of them I never knew about.
Yeah.
And I became a big fan of people like Fritz Lang, and Murnau, and, because I really like the 20s.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's hard to say. I know some of the big ones for me were, come here, Giselle, come here. Some of them were, come on. Gotta get them not run over. Psycho's one of my all-time faves,
Yeah.
Certainly The Haunting, the Robert Wise version. I don't know. Everything from, 2001 was huge for me when it came out,
Yeah. You have eclectic tastes.
Certainly, so much Kubrick. I like the Corman Poe series.
Mm-hmm.
I like of course, I like the Universal monsters.
Yep.
Frankenstein. I always thought Dracula never worked like I thought it should have.
Yeah.
I've always been a little disappointed.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've ever seen a Dracula movie that I really liked. Maybe, Nosferatu I do. That's great. Nosferatu is the vampire movie that really delivers, for me. But the Bela Lugosi one, and I don't know. It's good. Of course, it's classic. There's some good stuff in it, for sure.
Yeah.
And then when you get people like Coppola doing it, making it into some sort of weird backstory love story, I don't know. I don't know what to do about that. Although there's some really cool stuff in the Coppola one.
Yeah, I don't think Dracula's been well done either. Yeah.
I just don't think. I think Nosferatu did really caught it. Mm-hmm. I've never quite, Vampire. The what's the name of the great Swedish director, Dreyer? I've watched that thing, the silent one. I've watched it, tried to watch it a number of times, and never quite got why do people love it so much? Why do they say, "Oh, when I saw a vampire"? I don't know. But as you can see, a lot of my thoughts go to the genre movies, even though I love Lolita,
Oh yeah.
I love Dr. Strangelove. I really like a lot of Bergman, and I like Hitchcock's genre. Hey, Godfather, Taxi Driver. I mean, there's so many great movies that you just have to kind of find, sort of like your movie-going mind is kind of like a, kind of a hard drive with a lot of files in it. And if you just go into a file and go, oh, there's all these films, and then there's all these. So
yeah,
it's, if you start, talking about movies, then you start getting into it. But it's really hard to just make a list, I think, and say, oh, these are my 5 favorite movies of all time.
yeah.
I don't know. I think that's pretty hard to do. What's your favorite food? Oh, and there's almost more films than food.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have a eclectic taste like I do. So after high school, did you go to film school?
No, I never did that. I lived in Panama.
Mm-hmm.
So that was until I was in junior high.
Mm-hmm.
And then I lived in Puerto Rico for junior high.
Yeah.
And then at Puerto Rico, that's when I first saw, when I was in middle school. Now this would be the beginning of the 60s. That's when Psycho came out. I saw Psycho with my mother when it first came out.
Yeah.
That really messed me up.
Yeah.
But that's when I saw some of the Universal horror movies, and I had always wanted to watch them because when I got into middle school, when I was in grammar school, I got into Mad Magazine,
mm-hmm.
and also I used to, when I was a kid, I used to buy comic books back in the 50s, especially over there. Every kid had a comic book with them, kind of all the time. You carried it in your back pocket because it was the equivalent of your iPhone or your computer or your whatever. You sit down, you pull out your comic book,
Mm-hmm.
The comic books, I liked the superhero ones. This is pre-Marvel. But the first comic books I bought were the horror comics. The kind of, the DC comics.
Mm-hmm.
But the horror, but not the, now you see them, the compilations,
Yeah.
But they were just horror comics. They were really disturbing when you're like 8 years old,
Yeah.
At least when you don't have TV and you don't go to a lot of movies. And of course, when I got into middle school, that's when Marvel started up. So I got into all the Marvel comics. Well, there were only 2 really at the beginning. It was
mm-hmm.
Fantastic Four and Spider-Man. And I started reading Famous Monsters of Filmland, Tori Ackerman
Mm-hmm.
magazine, and that really had a big influence on me, just like it did to tons of people that are from my generation. That's where you learned about the genre. Tori showed you pictures of stuff you didn't even know existed. He told you about the horror actors and the monsters, and so that was sort of an education. But then when I got into high school, I moved to the United States
mm-hmm.
when I was 14 for my freshman year in high school, and we moved to Georgia, to Atlanta,
mm-hmm.
back in the era of civil rights. KKK. When I moved to Atlanta, it was like separate water fountains colored to the back of the bus. All that stuff was happening. And so at that point, I was still watching a lot of movies. I'd go see everything,
Mm-hmm.
When Dr. No came out, man, James Bond was it. I remember when Goldfinger came out. Man, that was the biggest thing ever, right?
Right.
Goldfinger was going to be it. I would love Bond. But I just saw everything I could. I would even in high school, I discovered art movies. That was the era of the kind of new wave. And so the art movie was happening. And I used to go on Sundays or something. I would go to the fine arts theater, go where they have these foreign movies,
right?
These art movies. And I'd go see those. I didn't know what I was watching, really, but I'd go see them.
Yeah.
And hey, listen, I'm just home. I'm going to put you on mute, and then I'm going to get up to my office, okay?
Okay. Brian, you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Okay. Next question, then.
Yeah, I just got in my office. Okay, I'm good.
Okay. What was the genesis behind your first movie, Self-Portrait in Brains?
I had decided I wanted to. I accidentally ended up with a 16 millimeter Bolex news camera, wind-up one. They were dumping them in the late 70s because video cameras were taking over for news.
Mm-hmm.
Used to be that news would be shot on these handheld wind-up Bolexes that had 3 lenses and would shoot for about, I think, a minute or so was it a minute?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe more than a minute. I forget, but just a small reel,
Yeah.
And they wouldn't take sound. Of course, they don't take sound. But then video cameras came in, and they started. The TV stations started having video cameras, and they started dumping the Bolexes, so you get them for nothing. At that time, I did a number of things. I built houses, but I also had an art supply store, and I actually painted paintings and sold them, and sold paints and brushes and all this, and also did photography and developed stuff in the darkroom, black and white, kind of art photography. And so I got that Bolex and started shooting, and I really liked it. I had a 16 millimeter projector, and it was just really, really cool. At that time I lived in the country in North Carolina, and I had about a dozen goats, that dogs and stuff, and turkeys, and I would shoot my goats. I'd film my goats and then watch them. and it looked like Bergman or something. You know what I mean? It was like, it just looked so cool. I had done Super 8 when I was in high school with a friend, so I had tried making movies before that, and I was always interested in the effects, the in-camera effects.
Yeah.
And so around the same time, I got one of the first Betamaxes. I was the first one of my friends, certainly, that got a videotape player, cassette player. When it began, it was all Betamax, and then VHS took over later. And I recorded movies. And at that time, the only pre-recorded stuff you could buy was porno, basically,
Mm-hmm.
And they were expensive too, really, like $70 for a feature film. And one Christmas was I had just started living with the girl that ended up being my wife,
mm-hmm.
and she was from North Carolina, and we were actually living in this sort of converted tobacco barn. So it's like a log cabin. And I had my Betamax, and she went home for Christmas, and so I spent Christmas alone. And
mm-hmm.
on purpose, really, And that day, I recorded 2 movies. I was so excited about the Betamax. And the 2 movies, one of them was The Killing by Kubrick, directed by Kubrick. And the other one was The Spiral Staircase with Dorothy McGuire. And I watched those movies. I recorded them, I watched them, and then you could, stop it, go back, watch again. Well, whoever could do that? Nobody, in the history of movies, only editors
mm-hmm.
got to do that. Or if you made a movie on the editing machine, could you actually kind of go from the end of one shot to the beginning of the next one? I when I was growing up, I assumed that the actors made up their own lines. Who knows how you make movies? And so I was, that really taught me, just by playing those movies, it really showed me how that movies are a series of shots. Even if you've read that or somebody said that, you might intellectually kind of get it, but it's like I intellectually understand that there's germs that make you sick and all that,
Yeah.
But I don't really know it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Who knows? Because I'm not a biologist. I'm not a microbiologist. I don't have an experience with this. But when I had that Betamax, I had the experience of watching the scene over again, of looking at how it was done, of being able to kind of manipulate it. And that was pretty exciting. And that's when I decided to make a movie. And a friend of mine who had an unfortunate car accident had a short story. And I thought, well, I'll make that into a movie. And I went on from there. I just tried doing it. It was mainly because I never thought that there was any way you could make a living at it. I should have known better, but I didn't. I just didn't know anybody who made a living making movies, TV or anything. And I didn't go to school or anything. So the way I learned to do it is I put an ad in the paper wanting somebody to help me make a movie. Mm-hmm. And this guy answered. He'd gone to the back then it wasn't a film department, it was the radio, television, and motion picture department at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. And that's where I was living at that time. And so he said, yeah, I know how to do it. And so I didn't know anything about it. I got some books. I got a bunch of books and I read about it and all that. And I shot the short and I didn't direct it. I didn't direct the short, and I produced it.
Mm-hmm.
And because the funny story is that when I asked my friend what a producer does, he said the producer is the boss and he makes the most money. And I thought, well, that's what I want to be. I've always wanted to be the boss and make the most money. And but then, of course, you get really then the short film. We finished it off and rented a editing machine and all this stuff. It was just really fun. And then I put it on VHS. We mixed it. We went through the whole process, and I showed it to my friends on a VCR.
Mm-hmm.
And once I watched it with my friends, I realized it was terrible. Before I saw it with them, I thought it was really good. I really enjoyed it. And once I sat with my friends, and they were all trying to be nice, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's that faint praise that kills you the worst. And so, like an idiot, instead of starting over with something else, I decided to expand it into a feature. So I went through like a year of, I write a scene, shoot it on the weekend, edit it during the week, and then I started directing it, and the whole feature ended up being terrible too. But it was certainly, that was my film school.
Yeah.
I've never taken a class in film or anything like that.
Yeah, same thing happened to Quentin Tarantino. He spent like 4 years making a short film, and he says that was his film school too, and that got him ready for Reservoir Dogs.
But did he direct that? Are we talking about the one where he's like a DJ?
It was called I think
it's on YouTube, I think.
Yes, it's called My Best Friend's Birthday or something like that.
Yeah, it's funny. I watched a lot of it. I forget how much, like 15 minutes. I forget how long it was.
Yeah.
But I didn't know that he directed it.
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing that did stand out is he was a hell of a presence on screen.
Yeah.
He was good. And he had that same, like, overwritten dialogue and,
Yeah.
I thought he was good in that. When I watched that, I went, yeah, this is I know that, you don't want people to watch that stuff. I totally understand that,
Yeah, and Fred Olin Ray
people
told...
always go, no, why? And you say, just please, I don't want, don't bother me. I've made enough bad movies professionally that I don't want to watch. But, don't watch the amateur stuff. And, but I did like that about Tarantino.
Yeah, and Fred Olin Ray told me that he gave him the camera to make that.
Well, the thing about Tarantino is he just had that. He just seems like that guy that if one gene went the other way, he'd be kind of like an idiot, and instead he's kind of like a genius.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He has that look that he could just sort of be I've met a lot of people who are kind of like that, but without the genius part.
Yeah.
Just kind of like a real, what do they call them, squid or something? People who are like really into something.
Yeah, like a savant.
And it's like an idiot savant thing.
Yeah.
But some people, they're just really fans and really into stuff, but they lack that one turn of the screw.
Yeah.
That makes them able to perform or to realize things.
Yeah.
And Tarantino, I'm not saying that, I certainly are mixed about a lot of his movies.
Yeah.
But I think the one thing I'm not confused about is that he's one of the most, influential filmmakers of my lifetime, my generation.
Yeah.
I think that there's things about him that I don't like.
Yeah.
but I certainly think that his stuff has influenced so many people. It's kind of so really kind of important, you know.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. So how did you make the leap to Los Angeles and get involved with Charlie Band's Empire?
Well, after I was doing that film, that meant I started reading a lot of books about movie making. They're all out of date, always, of course, because they're talking about another business. And I decided I was going to make another movie. I started reading the trades. I was reading Box Office magazine, especially. I'd read Weekly Variety.
Yeah.
I was reading about the physical part of making movies and also the business part.
Mm-hmm.
The part of financing and distribution was very difficult to get a grip of because I just didn't know I had no way of experiencing that, where I had experience actually shooting a movie and cutting it and mixing it down.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought I wanted to make another movie. And a lot of this stuff happened simultaneously. But because, at that age, you're doing 100 things at once. It's about 30.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a huge fan of Zap Comics, the underground comics scene that came out of Berkeley in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've seen all that. Mr. Natural, the R. Crumb stuff.
Oh, yeah. R. Crumb.
All those crazy comic books. I loved them. And I even sold them in my store. And so I really liked this comics of this guy named Kim Deitch. And he did these comics that were highly black and white, high contrast, and kind of a bit of a naive drawing style, but very consistent. And he told stories, and they were kind of ironic and sci-fi and cool, stories that really appealed to me. Like I love kind of ironic, satirical stuff.
Right.
And kind of subversive and transgressive stuff. And these Zap comics had all of that. They were transgressive, both sexually and socially.
Mm-hmm.
They were satirical. They were artistic. They were entertaining. There was just so much going on there. And so I went to see him in Berkeley because I wanted to option one of his stories, one of his comics, to make a movie. I thought, the problem with my movie was that I wrote it. Big mistake. Mm-hmm. Let me get something that's better. And so I went to see Kim, and at that time, it was just in the process of breaking up with his longtime partner, Sally Cruikshank. She's also was an animator. She was an animator. Mm-hmm. She made a fantastic short animation called Plaza with the Quackadero. Mm-hmm. One's called Make Me Psychic. I mean, these are fantastic stuff. And so I went and saw them, and they were breaking up. And so I told Kim, well, why don't you I'll pay you to write the script. Why don't you just come out? You can to North Carolina. I have a store in Harborough, which is right next to Chapel Hill, and you can stay in my store. There's down the hall. There's a bathroom. And so he came to North Carolina, and we worked on this project. And the original story that attracted me, what I wanted, was one called Born Again. It's about this guy on death row mm-hmm. who does this weird voodoo chant so he can have immortality and fame, and super fame. And so he gets reincarnated as a really famous potato. And so it's really kind of very, very satirical.
Yeah.
And then we expanded that into 3 stories. Once again, let's make a feature. We'll do 3 stories. And since we didn't really know how to write a script, and I decided that I probably didn't either, we just decided to make the script by cartoon. So he drew the script. I still have these things. And at the same time, I was thinking I should also get like a real director, somebody who knows what they're doing. And so then I started looking for a director, and I put an ad in Weekly Variety, like just the cheapest ad you could buy, and I put horror movie director wanted, and then put my address. And I got, this is pre-fax machines, you know?
Yeah.
I got hundreds of cards and letters. Hundreds. And then I started going through them and then just figure out if I could find a director. And eventually I came out to LA, and I think the first time I came out, I stayed for 3 days or maybe 4. Mm-hmm. And I just got a room, and I just had like 6 meetings a day. Meet 6 people, meet people. Mm-hmm. And I met a lot of people that, I still know some of them. And one of the things I did is I went to, I looked up Sally Cruikshank, because she was living in Sherman Oaks. And her, I don't know if he was her husband then, but he certainly is now, was, God, his name escapes me. It's the guy who produced the airplane movies.
Oh, Jim Abrams.
Comedy. No, that's the producer.
Howard Koch?
Look at that. Well, you'll know this name. Let's see. So this one, airplane.
John Davison?
Yeah, John Davison.
Yeah.
So he was at, like, that time, I think it was Columbia or MGM or something in Culver City. Mm-hmm. And so I went to see her and asked if he could, because Kim, I think, had told me, oh, John Davison's definitely going to know some directors. Mm-hmm. Why don't you ask Sally? And so I went to see her, and then she put me on the phone with John, and he said, well, he said somebody I should meet was this guy named Bob Greenberg. Mm-hmm. And Bob Greenberg had gone to, I think, USC Film School or something. And so I met Bob, and Bob impressed me. He had his business card said, Bob Greenberg, motion pictures, barbecue, spare ribs, the best of both. And I thought that was pretty good. And he had also worked on Dark Star, and he took me around to to show me LA and Hollywood. And he became my
mentor.
The guy who introduced me, who kind of showed me the layout,
Yeah.
And he wanted to direct the movie and so we even did a effects test for the potato thing, because the potato has to move,
Yeah.
And then he took me to the first movie set in LA that I ever visited, which was a Jim Wynorski set at Waddles Park. With Jim Wynorski with big buxom women and big snakes and
of course
fighting. And it was great. And then he introduced me to Albert Band. He introduced me to a lot of people.
Yeah.
A lot of, he took me on the studios and was just, and he just knew his way, he'd been living he'd gone to USC, so he'd been living in LA, he's really into movies. If you watch History of the World Part 1,
right,
Mel Brooks movie,
yeah,
the very end of it, there's this little bit of, right before the end, it's called Jews in Space.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they're if you remember that, they're in a rocket ship. Well, Bob is one of the Jews in Space.
Oh.
On Dark Star, I think he was the tomato monster wrangler. I don't think he's in it. But he introduced me to Dan O'Bannon and, just all these people. And eventually and introduced me to Albert Band, Charlie Band's father. I went to the set of Sword Kill. And then when I met Charlie and saw that he was doing Rage War and would end up being Dungeon Master, I guess, and these other movies, and he was doing sort of that Roger Corman, Edgar Allan Poe stuff that I love.
Right.
And so when I saw that, I went, man, this is what I want to be. I like this. And then I made a deal with Charlie to produce the movie that I was developing. And then, of course, he just took all the money and was hoping I'd go home. He took my money. His father would say, don't you want to go? It's about time you go back to North Carolina. It's just that typical thing when you go to, people that want to get into the movie business, you just get ripped off because you're coming in to get ripped off.
Yeah.
You're just saying, I want in, and you see that they're ripping you off, but you go, I want to get into the movie business. So
yeah.
I guess it's like boot camp, right?
Exactly.
But anyway, so I ended up getting involved with Charlie, and the project I had ended up being called Alter Ego.
Mm-hmm.
And then as it went along, I started, I'd see the movies he's making, and he was always running out of money, always. Never had money, right? He always had a crew that was just about to quit.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a video company, and so I started helping him get the money to pay the crew each week by finding people who would discount his video receivable.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd be willing to give pay huge, I guess it would be interest, big discounts, because he needed the money right now. And that's always been the story of Charlie. He's always sold out the future for today, constant.
Yeah.
And just not a very ethically challenged guy. If he wasn't such a conniver, he'd probably be the head of a studio right now or own one, because he's always seemed to be ahead of the game. But he just kind of used people up,
Yeah.
and just did kind of indefensible things. But he gave a lot of people work. Of course, I lost. I ended up getting kind of all the money from Re-Animator kind of taken away. I never got it because of the shenanigans.
Yeah.
So I have a whole history of that, but I think that that was how I got up with Charlie, and I started doing business by helping him helping him with his financing. And then when I realized I wasn't going to get my money back from him, and also he was never going to make my movie,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this only took me, it didn't take me long to figure that out,
Yeah.
And so then at that time I was still meeting directors. I think what you have to understand is none of this stuff is linear, you know?
Yeah.
It's all, you know, when you're in your 20s and 30s, you're always, you're always doing 5 things at once. You know, you have lots of different narratives going on with your business or your life.
Lots of energy.
And so I was still looking for a director, and Bob Greenberg said he realized that I wasn't going to have him direct. Or he just said I should meet Stuart Gordon in Chicago. And so I went to see Stuart over Thanksgiving, I think, 1983, and saw the plays he was doing, and met him, and we got along immediately, and I trusted him immediately, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, his talent and all that, you know, I mean, you can really, I really bet on it, out of all the other people I was dealing with. And he had the idea of doing a Lovecraft, you know, the Re-Animator.
Yeah.
And he had it as he had a pilot written for a series, and I just, right when we had dinner at his place, after I'd seen his play, a couple of his plays, you know, we drank beer and smoked pot and talked about horror movies. And he said that, I said, man, if you'll develop it if we can develop it to a feature, I want to do it. And so within 1 year, exactly 1 year later, right after Thanksgiving, we started shooting Re-Animator. And at that time, Charlie owed me money. And so what I did, I knew he had never given me the money, but I could make almost any other deal with him.
Yeah.
And so what I did is I used his offices to do the production out of. And I used his equipment. He had an editing day. We used that, and also I used his account at the lab. So it didn't matter if he paid me. You know, I was just balancing the books.
Yeah.
You know? So that was how I got involved with Charlie, and would have stayed involved with him if he hadn't kind of cheated me out of the sales of Re-Animator, you know?
Yeah.
And that, you know, that happened, you know, actually it was during From Beyond that I finally started seeing him, and, you know, and it ended up being kind of it was unfortunate because I would have been happy to keep making movies with him.
Yeah.
You know, because I like those kind of movies.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of, you know, he, of course, now he makes super trash, but, you know, back then he really had, had ambition.
Oh, he
really had ambition. He was really trying to do stuff. And I think that's similar to Roger Corman, you know.
Yeah.
Roger Corman started with crap in the 50s.
Yeah.
But he started trying to make real movies, and I think the height of his movie making was with the Man with the X-Ray Eyes.
Yeah.
Ray Milland. And you watch that movie, and man, that's like, it's just almost a big movie, you know, real thing. And when that didn't work, I think then he started doing his Poe series, and that just became a factory. And then he started, I think he just quit directing and started making money and getting into making all these, you know, he quit trying to make the big movies. And I think maybe I don't know enough about him, but maybe when his wife Julie, I think, was kind of instrumental in getting his business going. And
yeah.
I don't think he ever tried again to make, you know, to go for the big movie again until Frankenstein Unbound, and that was a misfire. And so I think he just said, hey, that's not what I do. I can understand that.
Yeah, every artist has their warm-up periods before they find their voice, you know.
Well, I don't know. It's a lot of it's luck. It's what worked, what didn't work, what, you know, where you got some success, and you're always making a living. You're always having, all your decisions are based on balancing the book. And so it's not, you know, I think a lot of people have the ability and the talent, plenty, but they just don't quite hit the right project at the right time. And then you don't, it's just bad luck.
Yeah.
Some of the most talented people that I'm most impressed with that I've run across, some of them, a lot of them nobody's ever heard of.
Yeah.
And yet, I think they're really top talent.
Yeah, there's a lot of
that nobody would know. It's very tricky to get recognition.
Yeah, there's a lot of gems out there, I have to say. When you did Bride of Re-Animator, did you know that you were going to direct it? And did Stuart Gordon say he just didn't want to do a sequel?
There's that. After I started suing, I was working on RoboJocks. Robot Jocks, I think they called it.
Yeah, Robot Jocks.
That Stuart, From Beyond and Dolls were in post. I think this was the spring to summer of '85. And while we were on the set of From Beyond, I told Charlie and the lawyer, CEO or whatever of his company at that time that I had filed a lawsuit. And we stayed, I started dissociating from Charlie. I started, separating, and I jumped off the Robot Jocks project because it wasn't, I felt like I really couldn't be working with Charlie while I was suing him because I had people I owed money to or people that had invested in Re-Animator. And I just felt like I couldn't. It just seemed like such a conflict of interest. I think I could have kept working with him. I mean, I didn't. I don't know. It's not like I felt like the guy was cheating me, but I didn't feel like I couldn't work with him. Be more careful. Don't put any money on it.
Yeah.
But anyway, I just thought, well, inevitably, of course, it was going to all quit. And then Stuart, I had a project financed to do Dagon, and that Stuart directed. And then Stuart wanted to stay with Charlie. And so he stayed and made a number of more movies with Charlie. And then after that, I tried to do a project with Dan O'Bannon called The Men, about a woman who discovers that all men are aliens. And I worked with him for almost a year on it. And when I finally got the deal for it, to make it, Dan backed out. And then I started feeling like, I felt like I was having trouble because I didn't have a director. And on top of it, I always thought the movies were mine, but when all of a sudden the reviews and the publicity and everything came out, I realized, no, the director gets all the credit.
Yeah.
I thought I'd like a little of the credit. And then on top of it, I think anybody who's ever worked on movies and on a movie set and worked like on a show, not just visiting, probably most everybody on that set thinks that they wouldn't mind directing.
Yeah.
At one point, you just kind of go, I think I could do that. But, a heady experience, the pressure's really terrible. But also, when I did Re-Animator, I kind of was, I was where the buck stopped, There was nobody. I owned it. I paid for it. I decided what to do. And, but with every movie after that, I was more in a political situation as a producer. And so I kind of wanted more, wanted more influence on the set than probably a producer should have. But of course, I knew all this.
Yeah.
And so then I just decided, well, the answer is I want to try directing. I'll try directing. I don't think, I told myself it was because I just wanted to be a one-stop shop. I didn't want to not get a deal. I'd already lost a couple deals in 1 year because the directors didn't want to do it. Of course, this is typical. I didn't realize it at that time because I didn't know anything about the movie business. All I knew is that when I visited the AFM with the Empire badge in 1984 or something, all of a sudden I saw people buying and selling movies, and I said, I get it. Now I understand the business. You make a movie and you sell it to foreign people, and you get more money than you paid for it. Of course, that was really possible in the VHS era. The video era was just breaking out, and I got that, but I didn't know anything about how the studio stuff worked. I didn't know anything about the kind of Shark Tanks and dogfights and all the real politics, the real power stuff of being in a studio. And there's of course that is what people, when people talk about Hollywood, that's what they're talking about. They're talking about the studio.
Right.
But when I looked at Hollywood, I just had this idea, man, if I could make a living making movies, that's way better than everything else I tried. Way better.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember once I was trying to do a project with Dario Argento, and he was staying at a hotel on Sunset, and he came over. I was introducing him to a finance guy, and he was at the hotel writing a script that he was going to shoot. So every day he was trying to write the script, and I thought, man, I'd like to do that. I'd like to just sort of be holed up in the hotel writing a script, and that's how I make my living. That sounds good,
Yeah.
And so that was, but my idea of Hollywood is probably skewed a little more towards the Ed Wood area. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That kind of like, well, we just do it. I don't need any education. I don't need any training, And so I think you end up being kind of like a big frog in a little pond, But if you want to do the big, get into that big pond, boy, the competition, it's a whole different thing. You better learn how to swim.
Yeah.
But that was, so what I, instead of looking at it like, well, I'll just really just produce a lot of movies because you can make money producing if you do it with some alacrity. But directing, people will pay you to direct.
Yeah.
You don't have to pay a director hardly. Director will work. People who do creative, they'll do it for nothing.
Right.
Of course, if they become big and famous, they're worth a ton. And people always, I used to always say that the amount of money you make is inversely proportional to how close you get to the camera.
Yep.
You want to be around the camera, you're going to make less money. You're willing to stay way outside of the whole production thing, you can make money. And then people say, oh, but how about Tom Cruise and how about Martin Scorsese? And I say, yeah, but those are the stars I'm talking about in general.
Yeah.
In general, if I had financing for a movie right now, I could get a director to do it for virtually nothing.
Mm-hmm.
They would do it. You'd do it. Somebody told me, hey, you want to direct this movie? Here, you go.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me see. I'm going to have to quit my job and
yeah.
live out of my car, but I'm on board,
Yeah.
So that was kind of part of it. I think people just want to try it. And then, of course, you're chasing that rabbit, and you're going down the rabbit hole, and your financial life is going to get very, very insecure. But
yeah.
in any case, that's what I decided to try. A friend of mine had gotten involved with this little upstart company called Wild Street Pictures, and they were doing these super cheap movies and trying to sell them, and they were being financed by these Japanese companies. And so I was really into that. I helped them with that. I said they were going to make a Lovecraft thing, and so I gave them advice. And I would look at their sets, and I said, man, I want to do business with you. I want to do what you're doing. It's just like with Empire. When I saw what they were shooting, Rage War, it's like, that's what I want to do. I want to do these crazy kind of genre things, that, I don't know, there's something about them. They just seem like fun,
Mm-hmm.
And so I told them that, and I knew that, so I thought, I want to direct a movie. And I knew that nobody's ever going to let me direct a movie, but unless I pay for it. But I knew that I owned the Re-Animator sequel. And so I figured, well, I can get a chance to direct if I bring the sequel. I could have taken that sequel probably to Fox and MGM,
Yeah.
But I would have been a producer on it,
Yeah.
And, but I never tried to do something like that. I never even considered it because I figured nobody would take me. I wouldn't have any weight, and I didn't know how to deal with those people. And so I made a deal with my friend, and I said, okay, I'll do the Re-Animator sequel, but I want to do two movies. I want to do two movies, but the Re-Animator sequel has to be the second one. I figured if I'm terrible at directing, I'll need another chance,
Yeah.
If you only get one chance, boy, that's tough. And so I thought I'll make sure that I hold the Re-Animator sequel in my pocket for my second chance.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the deal I made. Now with Stewart, at that time we were going around pitching stuff, and he had a real high-end agent. He had a top agent.
Mm-hmm.
I've never had an agent or a manager in my life. Well, that's another problem. I wouldn't join a guild, and I didn't want to have an agent. So I just didn't get in. I didn't, I was just kind of short-sighted. And he had this hot agent because, Stewart, when he started in movies, he'd already had 10 years as a professional theater director.
Yeah.
So this isn't a guy who came out of nowhere like me. He may not have known, it may have been his first movie, but it wasn't his first time directing. He was a professional.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the things that people, when they watch Re-Animate, they go, God, it's so good. And you go, yeah, we just never had someone's first cheap horror movie be made by someone that's that good of a director.
Yeah.
We just never had that. And so I did ask him once about the sequel, and he and at one point he did say, "Oh, my agent says I don't do sequels." I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm sure his agent did say that, but I think that he had other ideas, and eventually I worked with him and Dennis on a script and a treatment for a sequel. And then when the financing came in, it was going to, I had to start shooting in 4 months or something. And the Japanese wouldn't, or 3 months, I forget. It's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
And, the deal with the Japanese, back then the Japanese had tons of money. And they were just like, you have to start shooting the first week or two or the money's gone. And I don't know why. And so I didn't argue, but then Stewart didn't think they could have a script
for another 6 months. And I said, yeah, but then I don't have financing. But Stuart was also working on a movie at that time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, man, that time I had 4 kids by that time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I said, well, I'm gonna, I just paid them, and then I started a new story script with the Writers in Society, and we just jammed through, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But it was, you know, it was certainly, I think I had pretty much decided that, you know, that the Re-Animator sequel was just going to be my chance to direct. And, you know, I would probably never, you know, I guess my approach to the movie business has always been, well, you know, I'm someone who's never had a resume in his life, right? I've never taken a resume.
Yeah.
And I was just thought, nobody's ever going to hire me. I can't convince people to like me or to whatever. And, you know, by that time, I was like 30 years old, you know.
Yeah.
Early 20s, people would take you on as kind of like, you're going to be their acolyte. They're going to train. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can have a mentor or something. And I was just always like, I just never did that. You know, I was a hippie. And I dropped out of college, became a hippie, and did all these, you know, group businesses and stuff. And I think just by virtue of the energy you have at that age, I made money. And at that time, you could do it.
Yeah.
So I think as I got into my 30s, I was just like, well, I'm going to go try to convince somebody to let me have power. No, I don't think so. Nobody's going to do that.
Yeah.
So that's why. So I think ultimately maybe it was that. Maybe God knows, you know, so many different aspects to things, and you never can trust your memory or somebody else's memory. You know, we're always confabulating everything. So,
Of course.
you know, we create a new narrative every time we tell the story.
Yeah. Good way to put it. Yeah, Kathleen Kinmon is a frequent guest on the podcast. She's actually coming on again this Friday to talk about her new children's book. How did you find her?
Just through the normal casting process.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that we, as I recall with the casting of Bride of Re-Animator, for the most part, I don't ever remember. There was a couple roles that could have gone either way,
Mm-hmm.
but I feel like I don't ever remember. I know there was other options for the bride, you know,
Mm-hmm.
but I never remember it being much of a big decision. I think she always kind of fit the bill, you know.
Yeah.
Like she looked like the Bride of the Animator, but we had to fake her early on when she's in bed. We had to, when we pick her up in the first scene, I think Dan lifts her out of the bed because her body is so deteriorated.
Yeah.
And we got a little skinny girl to play that part. So when he starts lifting her, we cut to another angle. He lifts up someone altogether different. They never really played that way, but I guess my feeling, you know, the thing about Bride of Re-Animator is that when we started the new script, I read the Frankenstein novel.
Mm-hmm.
And the version I read was actually the one with the illustrations by Bertie Wrightson. And I had tried reading Frankenstein when I was a teenager, and I never liked it. It just seemed terrible.
Mm-hmm.
Harsh and difficult to read, and nothing cool happened, like in the movies, you know.
Yeah.
And but when I was, all of a sudden, I'm in my 30s, and I read this thing, and all of a sudden, I kind of got it. You know, I was ready to slow down and kind of get it. And then I got kind of, wow, then I understood why Boris Karloff pulled his back teeth. Because, you know, went through so much to do the performance.
Yeah.
Because, wow, there's some real aspirational thinking in that book. And then, of course, I was the title, you know, kind of refers to the James Whale movie. So we're doing, you know, Bride of Re-Animator. You know, like we had Frankenstein, and we had Bride of Frankenstein.
Yeah.
And so as we started brainstorming the story, believe it or not, when they put out, you know, I got a call from David Gale, right, Dr. Hill.
Yeah.
While we were developing that, while we were just beginning to talk about the story, and David Gale called me and said, "Hey, I hear you're doing a sequel to Re-Animator." I said, "Yeah." He said, "What's in it for me?" Which is like the classic actor thing. That's what actors always say. What's in it for me? Mm-hmm. What part? Is there a part for me? And I said, "Gosh, David, man, you kind of ripped, your body was ripped apart. Your head was crushed and thrown like a sponge against the wall." I said, "I don't know. It just seems like we were pretty gone." He said, No, I've got some ideas." Mm-hmm. And I thought, man, here's a guy that really wants to do it, you know? Mm-hmm. And at that time, we were having a hard time getting Jeffrey to agree. And, you know, Barbara didn't want to do it. And well, it was just, I think she just wanted a bigger part, maybe. But it was just, I just felt like we were really off on our own trying to make this. And I thought, damn, David Gale really wants to do it. My God, we're putting him in. and so I just decided and that's where the idea came. Well, he's going to be in it. Let's put him in the sideshow. Now, so we made the scene of the sideshow. You know,
yeah.
Because in the first movie, they say no job in a sideshow.
Right.
And I always wanted to do, you know, I always loved those what are those, what's his name, movies, the House on Haunted Hill.
Oh, William Castle.
Yeah, William Castle. And man, I loved William Castle when I was in grammar school. I saw House on Haunted Hill when the skeleton came floating over the auditorium. You know, it was just great. Yeah. And I love those things. I love the Tingler, House on Haunted Hill, 13 Ghosts, but not quite as good, but it's cool. You know, Mr. Sardonicus, and you know, all those kinds of things. And one thing I loved was when, like on House on Haunted Hill, for example, mm-hmm. you'd have the people's faces float right out, you know, float in front of the camera, right, talking to the audience, you know. Right. And I thought that was so macabre, you know. So I just decided I want to do that, but bloody, but in color. So the only thing lacking was to do it in 3D. You know, if I could have done it in 3D, man. And then so I thought I'm going to do that opening, you know, with David Gale's head come floating, dripping blood right at the audience and talk to the audience, you know. Yeah. And then I justified it by showing that he was fake floating in the sideshow. You know, they had rigged him up. They had gotten it. So I came up with this idea that they called it the Miskatonic Massacre, you know. Yeah. They kept all the stuff, but the stuff didn't really decay, all the body parts. And so you could see how it just started rolling along. But I think the biggest chance we took was the night that Woody Keith and I and Rick Fry were sitting in my living room trying to figure out what to do with David Gale, because he didn't have a body. How's he going to carry his head around? And we talked about all kinds of things, like having him kind of have to be sewn to his hand with a spur, you know, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then I think it must have been Woody Keith that had just put wings on him, you know. And then I thought, that's just too crazy. We're going to get laughed out and worry and agitate.
Yeah.
This is really, really good. That thing, Dr. Hill. But then we just went, well, fuck it, let's do it. You know, let's just plot forward, you know,
yeah.
And it became, you know, I don't know, you know, it's kind of delightful in a way. You know? And I tried to go back to the original. Stories of Lovecraft, because not much of it had been used in the first movie.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't a lot of the Lovecraft bits, you know, a lot of the short stories. And so in the short stories, you know, Dr. Hill isn't a doctor. He's like a lieutenant. His head is cut off, crashing his plane in the war, and it falls into a pot of goop. This kind of this advanced version of the serum,
right?
That has some iguana thing in it or something, and it means that things can live on their own, or something, not just their bodies. Well, in the first one, we had already decided that the arm can be alive in the elevator, for example.
Yeah.
And that the head can be. We took the head stuff. In the original pilot, there was no Dr. Hill head. There wasn't even a Dr. Hill. And so we added that. So I wanted to carry the head thing around, because I like those kind of movies. So we had already jumped the gun on that. We'd already kind of outstripped the logic of the story, which made it was kind of goofy to actually have body parts be alive. But in any case, I decided that we'd do the goop, we'd do the war, we'd do the house by the cemetery, we'd do the, the putting the failed experiments in the crypt, have the in the book, there's the last chapters, the legions of the dead come after rest and carry him off. And so he's going to get taken down by his failed experiments. Of course, nobody ever had the bride or building. Nobody had, none of the stories had, like, constructing a body. And I thought that, the Frankenstein thing, I read about the production of Bride of Frankenstein, of how they developed the script and everything. And one thing that, because I decided that for doing Bride of Frankenstein, they should build the bride around the heart, not the brain. And that's just sort of a kind of traditional sexual type thing, right? I'm sure they're very incorrect, but, you think that in Frankenstein, they used a brain to, they put a brain in the beast. It's called a brain. When they were developing the bride, actually, there was a scene that they didn't finally incorporate in the final script, in which they did cut out this girl's heart and use it to make the bride. So I thought, wow, we're on the right track. And then there was this thing in the movie in which she was really big, because you have to, and so was Frankenstein. And in the book, the logic of it is that if you're building something, it's easier to do it in a bigger size,
Yeah.
So there was that. And then I wanted to incorporate, like, metal fittings,
Yeah.
for the with the flesh. Because I always think it's kind of cool to have the metal and flesh together. And so then we came up with this. You can see kind of once you decide that Dr. Hill's head's going to be around, and that and all these elements are going to be there, and that we want them to build a bride, and we're going to have Dan and Wes. We're not adding a new sidekick or something. now you're into what's the point of it? And so we just took advantage of the motivation from the first movie, which of course is not, isn't completely kosher when we're writing a story. It should be based on the previous movies. That was it. It was that Dan was in love with me.
Right.
And so the fact that here's Meg's heart, that's based on the first movie, but that became the motivation for him and the conflict. And, I don't think, of course, I think the movie has some very, very weak parts in it. Stuff that really doesn't work and all that. Mm-hmm. But it does have, I think, kind of this kind of more obsessive operatic tone to it, which I purposely wanted to make it really kind of more operatic, and they Dan have kind of billowing sleeves to his shirt. And, had the set built so it had these really heavy beams at the ceiling. Had Westgate, his great diatrabagant God, and there's all these cool scenes in it, and some of the connecting stuff wasn't very good. I think all in all, there's a lot to like in it.
Yeah, I think it's just as good as the first. I like it. Why do you think more people didn't see Society when it came out?
Well, for one reason, nobody really liked it. That was one thing. Even my friends didn't like it. Stuart liked it. Stuart liked it. I remember that. Mm-hmm. But a lot of people I know, they didn't care for it. And I think there was a number of reasons. I think it was not, this was the era of Nixon and Wall Street and greed is good and all this kind of stuff. And this was a big satire on all that. I thought it was great. I thought it was, I just thought it was the best thing. And I think it was, it had been financed by Japanese money, but the company that got the rights, the English language distribution rights, is a company called Medusa in the UK. Mm-hmm. So the owner of Wall Street Pictures was from the UK, but he lived in Japan. And so they took it to the UK, and before they did anything with it in the US, and then Wall Street did the foreign sale. And in the UK, it actually did real well. It was like considered a real movie. Mm-hmm. And Sight and Sound, which is this really kind of intellectual movie magazine, thought it was good. They even hired me to write an article for them,
Yeah.
And it was released there like a regular movie, and they would, people up there told me, Medusa told me that, hey, the movie's doing really good. But you got to remember, this is way before the internet. And you didn't know. What do you know?
Yeah.
It's just over there, And I saw that it was, it just wasn't mainstream at all.
Yeah.
And so it never actually even was released here until a couple of years after, like 91 or something.
Yeah.
It was just old and in the way. It was just, I don't know, and people didn't like it. In the UK, they really liked Society and didn't really like Bride of Re-Animator.
Yeah.
And in the U.S., they really liked Bride of Re-Animator and didn't like Society. And I was certainly super disappointed. And I remember I think the second or third day of shooting of production on Bride,
yeah,
the Animator, the Society variety, variety, daily variety review of society was published, was printed, and it was terrible. Just kind of almost like personally insulting. You know, it's really bad.
Yeah.
And so you're just feeling just beaten up by that, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, but I was invited to Features Film Festival to show it, and believe it or not, it didn't even win the best special effects. And you know what won the best special effects? Miracle Mile, the Steve Dujardin movie.
Oh, yeah.
It didn't hardly have effects. It just had cars crashing into each other.
Yeah.
And you just saw that people really didn't like it.
Yeah.
They really didn't like it. They really thought it was not a nice movie or something. And I don't think just because it was, you know, kind of clumsily directed in some places. You know, there's stuff about it that's pretty, you know, not very good. But
Yeah.
there's a lot of movies like that don't get real negative response. You know, they're just kind of, you know, clumsy.
Yeah.
But I always thought I thought it was great. And then over the years, you know, all of a sudden it's quite popular in Italy. It's put on TV in Italy.
Yeah.
And it was released theatrically in Italy, Spain, France, and all these countries started having some, you know, I started hearing about it. And over the years, you know, there were people who liked it. I'd run into people who liked it. And it was like, you know, in the, like 2008 or 2007,
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden I started getting interest in it, you know.
Yeah.
And by then I owned the movie. And so I knew when somebody wanted to screen it. And all of a sudden it started getting this new audience. Now part of it is because everybody loves everything 80s.
Yeah.
And so everything 80s is cool, everything VHS is cool, all that. And and the 80s are forgiven for a lot of the weaknesses in the movies, just like we forgive the Giallos
Yeah.
a lot. You know, we know a lot of large bits of Giallos are terrible, but in general we forgive it because it just is something special, something different. And I think that everything in the 80s, I think there's a because of the video revolution, when everybody was making, you could finance a movie, you could sell the video.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of these movies were not, like I made Re-Animator and I eventually got all my money back. And today, you make a movie, you probably aren't getting your money back in independent movies.
Right.
You're just not getting it back.
Yeah.
But there was a time during video when you could get it out there on video, money would come back. People, because the studios weren't taking over video like they did. It was pre-Blockbuster and all that.
Yeah.
And a lot of companies were making movies like, you know, Empire, but there's a lot of them. And it wasn't like there was such a strong hand on people making them. They just needed the movie. And they were selling the movies before they were ever made. Selling titles, independent.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was this time when a lot of stuff was getting made in a way that was kind of less self-conscious. Now, everybody is like gone to film school, and you don't even have to go to film school. Just go on YouTube to learn everything you need to know.
Yeah.
The people are so film literate now, you know, and they've seen everything, and they can see everything.
It's a different time.
Shoot a movie with your phone, and it's not a joke. You can, and you don't need the big crew, and you don't need any professionals to make the movie, but the movies are very self-conscious,
Right.
and they don't quite, in the 80s, you were just trying to make a movie. You weren't trying to make, it wasn't, of course, you always have ambition, you want to make something people love.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like you were trying to be an artist. You were like, oh, that's what you could say. And, you know what I mean? It was generally kind of like, it's all very self-conscious. I mean, you see it in the music. That it can't just be commercial. You can't just, you have to be an artist. You have to have some social media stuff. And I think one reason that society got kind of discovered was one is because it had this satirical political kind of basis to it, when that was totally not happening. Totally not. You know what I mean? And now people do it on purpose.
Yeah.
And also the effects of society. Society wasn't a seminal movie the way Re-Animator. Re-Animator gave rise to some movies like Halloween was seminal. And once we had Halloween, and we had Friday the 13th, and we had Slasher. It became this thing that was done to death. But society, nobody tried to make a society movie. It's kind of a slippery character. It's hard to figure out what it is. And so I think there was a mix of stuff. There was the idea that, it was fit the politics of the time, Great Recession and all that. All of a sudden, hey, maybe there are classes. In England, of course they know there's classes. You don't have to tell them a Brit that there's very rigid classes.
Yeah.
Society. But in the U.S., there, especially in the 80s, there's this idea, man, if you just work hard, you're going to make $1 million.
Yep.
Everybody's got the chance,
Yep.
And then in the 2008 to 10, then people go, no, actually, I went to college, I got the good grades, I borrowed a lot of money to do it, I did all that, and I can't afford to live in L.A., and I can't pay for a house, and somehow the system isn't working for me, and yet there's these billionaires everywhere. And people so it's like a shock. But in the 80s, people didn't feel like that. I don't think, not nearly as big as now. I think that the special effects were something that still stand up as being really extraordinary.
Yeah.
It's kind of, so in a way, it's also kind of like the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. What that old movie, you kind of go, and it wasn't a success. And you go, wow, what a weird looking movie.
Yeah.
I think there's a bit of that with society. You go, what the heck is this?
Oh, yeah. Blade Runner got so many movies. They didn't get respect at the time, and then later they became cult successes.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of reasons why it, why society. I mean, I'm just guessing. But of course, I'm really, really glad about it. Because if there's one thing that's more satisfying than having a movie that people like, is having a movie that people didn't like and then they liked it.
Yeah.
It's like The Ugly Duckling. It's like you want people to like your bad movie.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, every bad movie I've done, when I've had a chance to really be involved with it, you put all the work into it every time. It's just that sometimes it's the wrong, there's things working against you. And sometimes you just make bad choices.
Yeah.
And so you can fail, and when you fail in a movie, everybody gets to slam it,
Yeah.
I mean, everybody gets to say what a piece of shit in the movie is. That goes with the territory. And, that's hard.
Yeah.
So you'd like your piece of shit movies to then somehow be discovered. I always tell people that about with society. I say, hey, don't give up on your ugly duckling. Don't give up on your failures.
Yeah.
Time may come, you know.
Yeah.
Time may come when all of a sudden they, you know, they were just, they weren't right for that time, you know.
Yeah.
So we would like to think that everything we do is good. Of course, we know it's not.
Well, my favorite movie you've ever done is The Dentist.
That one worked pretty well.
Yeah, where did that come from, and how did you get the idea to cast Corbin Burnson?
Well, on The Dentist, I was working with Trimark Pictures. I had made Return to the Living Dead 3 for them.
Mm-hmm.
And when we finished it, they were happy with it. And I went out to lunch with the head of the company, Mark Amin, and he said, well, let's do another movie. What do you want to do? And I'd been around long enough by then.
Yeah.
I said, no, what do you want to do? Because you never want to do you always want to do what the guy who's going to get it to go wants to do. What Mark wanted, he said, I have an idea. I think the dentist. And I think he even already had a piece of artwork, which was just generic, a hand. I think they even used it. It's a hand with a drill and someone in the chair.
Mm-hmm.
You don't see who's the dentist. And I didn't like the idea. I mean, my heart sank. But, of course, I was enthusiastic. Oh, great idea, because I wanted to, I needed to make the movie. Mm-hmm. And he was somebody who was asking me to do it,
Yeah.
It was like I didn't have to convince him,
Yeah.
And I've never been one I never actually went around pitching movies. That's another thing that I don't have in common with a lot of people, is I have never had any success pitching.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like all the movies I make, the money is there and the timetable's there, but we got to come up with the movie. So most of the stuff I've done has been to fit a deal, not because, I was going around trying to get people to do something. Like even with Society, I already had the agreement to make a movie. I just had to find a script that would be accepted.
Mm-hmm.
With Brian Re-Animator, we had a sequel, and we'll come up with a story. So these, I was hired to do Return of the Living Dead 3 before we had a story.
Mm-hmm.
And we just had a deadline when we want to make it. And with the dentist, it was that similar thing. Mark Amin he said, make a dentist movie, but he said, I don't want it to be supernatural. I don't want it to be sci-fi. I just want it to be about how afraid you are when you just sit in the dentist chair. And so that was kind of way out of my wheelhouse, because normally the stuff I do is just all about weird stuff,
Mm-hmm.
And so then we had to find a writer, and I probably went, interviewed like 2 dozen more finally. And then finally, Stuart Gordon and Dennis Paoli had an idea for it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was what we took. And then they wrote the first draft of the script. And then eventually, the story gets very complicated. But eventually, because I stepped away from the project and moved to Canada to make it.
Mm-hmm.
And to make Crime Freeman for a year, and came back, and they were going to make The Dentist in Montreal, Pierre David producing,
Mm-hmm.
for way cheap money. I mean, there's a lot of stories of The Dentist. It's very interesting, but more than very circuitous kind of route. And also, the budget went down because I actually ended up setting something in motion to compete against my own project.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I don't have time right now to talk about it. But
Okay.
it's pretty fascinating to me. But anyway, from the, you know, we, you know, by that time a new writer had come on. His name Charles Fitch.
Uh-huh.
And he didn't like it. He just did a pass. He did a pass, but he changed. He added a whole bunch to the basic core of what Stewart and Dennis had come up with.
Mm-hmm.
And then the script was just kind of, you know, it was one of those things where I was figuring out the ending of the movie while we were doing location films. You know, that's how crazy it was.
Mm-hmm.
So you hear about movies like that where it's sort of like the script is being written while you're shooting, and the dentist is like that. But and it was no money, and it wasn't fantastical. But the one cool thing was that what Finch had added was he kind of bookended it with the dentist being in a mental hospital.
Mm-hmm.
Although it wasn't bookended. It just didn't. He didn't have an ending, and he added some cops and the school thing, and also I think he was the one that added the theme rooms of the dentist room. A lot of stuff, you know, and all of that stuff started working for me. I liked the part of it that made it possible for me to get into it.
Mm-hmm.
Was that there were these scenes where you saw the world, because I think about the dentist character, and I thought, this guy's terrible. How can you do a movie about it, you know?
Yeah.
And I hadn't ever done really a body count movie.
Yeah.
You know, it's just not, never did a slasher thing. It's not, I'm more into the weird stuff, you know?
Yeah.
And so when there was this, then when you see the world from his point of view, then I start thinking, well, now I can see a way into this, because now I can sympathize with him. I see it from his point of view. And he really loved opera. And he really loved his wife. You know, so I tried to glom into that and think, well, this is a guy who cracks because he's not a particularly nice guy anyway, but
yeah.
he cracks because he's disappointed in love. But, you know, he's a real romantic. And so all of that kind of stuff, his POV, you know,
Yeah.
and if you can get into a little surrealist stuff. And then, but it still ended up being a complete movie pretty much inside of one set, you know, the dentist office. And so what I did, and I mean, that's one of the few movies I did. We couldn't even afford a storyboard artist for even a short time.
Oh, yeah.
I did all the storyboards myself on it, and I kind of did the movie in a totally different way than what I've been doing. Mm-hmm. And I tried to make it really designy because it was so limited, and it was all bright, pretty much. Mm-hmm. And so it had such a condensed place and time, and it was a body count. He kills people, and so I had just finished working on Brian Freeman, pretty much, you know, with Christoph Gans, and I'd just done Necronomicon with him, and so I was really being, you know, I had been working with him so much. He's very cinematic with his shooting, very self-consciously directorial and framing and stuff. So I decided I'd do the movie that way. I'd have really rigid frames and really designed transitions and, you know, these really kind of stylized ways of doing the killing. And so with the killings, I actually just kind of borrowed a bunch of gimmicks from Hitchcock. And he did, like a number of the killings are just straight out of, like, when she's getting the, you know, remember she's got the scissors in her hand. No, that's the Hitchcock thing. But
right.
In the chair getting killed. All those shots are from Dial-In for Murder.
Yeah.
And so is the shot when Elizabeth goes outside and we go around
Yeah.
And so I picked these scenes and tried to do it the way that those kinds of movies were, mainly the Hitchcock ones, because it's kind of more of a kind of jolting cut, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so so it ended up being much more designy. And, you know, I did things like, you know, when the dog gets killed,
Mm-hmm.
kills up, and then all of a sudden we have these kind of paste on clouds.
Yeah.
And then it turns out we're in the dentist's office. So that transition, I mean, today you do it digitally, but back then what I did is I put the dog and the bushes in the dental office.
Mm-hmm.
And did that one shot in the dental office, and then got rid of it, and we had our transition. You think you're going to the sky. Oh, you think you're going to the sky, but there's some cut-out angels. And you go, oh, this isn't where we expect. So those kinds of things were kind of, you know, I really leaned a lot on making it more stylish. And I think the movie was more, you know, it's kind of more mainstream. It's a movie that worked well with it's a mainstream movie, and I usually not done, I'm usually too far over the, you know, over the edge. So that one was very, you know, it kind of worked, it kind of did well with general audiences. You know, I mean, as a scary movie. You know.
Yeah. And how did you find Corbin Burnson to do the role?
Well, he was just proposed. But believe it or not, at one point, Chevy Chase was proposed.
Really?
I spoke with Chevy Chase's agent. He would have been terrible.
Oh my God! Yeah, I mean.
And I didn't. And all I knew about Corbin was that, you know, he had been like the bad father. I saw clips of him, you know.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, that can work, you know. But, you know, they needed some name for it, you know. Mm-hmm. And he was kind of a bad guy in L.A. Law, you know.
Yeah. So do you have any?
It turned out it was.
Oh, go ahead.
It was so lucky to get him.
Yeah.
Because, believe it or not, he'd never done any genre stuff.
Yeah.
But he is such a natural for it.
Yeah.
Some of the scenes, you know, he would come up with how to cover it. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if he was in it, he'd say, oh, I'll do this, and you can do this. And, you know, so it was like really, you know, a real collaboration. I mean, we also kind of had stress between us.
Yeah.
But anyway, it was lucky. It was lucky, and that was certainly a movie that could have been just terrible.
Yeah.
And all the things against it.
Chevy Chase.
You kind of go, wow, that kind of pulled together. It's just luck, because I've had movies that have lots going against it, and then at the end they don't kind of all come together.
Yeah.
And they just end up not being very good. And that one could have been not very good.
Yeah. Chevy Chase. Oh my God. So really quickly, do you have anything new that you're working on?
Well, nothing's in production. I'm working on a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've got projects. I think I've got a TV show that maybe I want to do a series, you know, because that's where the money is now. And also, it's kind of cool to think some of these things are basically 10-hour movies. You know?
Yeah.
So I'd like to do that, but it's tough. You know, I've had, you know, until just recently, I thought I had to financing for a Re-Animator 4, Re-Animator Unbound.
Yeah.
And it was, you know, I think the script was good, and I really worked hard to kind of design it, and then the financing falls apart.
Oh.
So I'd really like to do that.
Yeah.
You know, I'm working with a guy on kind of a cheap, kind of episodic, maybe almost mobile app version of the Blood Island movies.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've ever seen those.
I've heard of them, yeah.
Yeah, well, they're real pulp. It's what they call tiki horror. They're shot in the Philippines.
Yeah.
And they just have the craziest horror shit. And I told them, man, if it's done fast,
Yeah.
if it's done really cheap, it could be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
You know, but these are all, you know, until you have money, you don't have a concept.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's the name of the game.
Well, Brian, I hope those projects come to fruition, and I hope you get a series. And I thank you so much for coming on tonight. This was amazing. Like to maybe talk to you again in the future.
Sure. Let me know how I can promote the interview and everything. Just send it to me
Oh yeah, we can connect.
I mean, in the email. Whatever.
Okay, I'll write it in the email. Well, Brian, thank you so much, and you have yourself a great night.
Okay, talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Talk to you later. Bye-bye. Well, there you have it. Brian Yuzna. Ain't he a cool dude? One of the masters of horror. Great stories, great guy. If you like this video, everyone, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Add me as a friend on Facebook. Join my Tommy Kovac comedian page on Facebook. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram and all that fun stuff. Well, that's all the time we have this week on Splat from the Past. Until next time, this is Tommy Throwback Kovac saying there's no shame in living in the past because the present sucks. Later, dudes.